Greetings, Andy here again, and I'm jumping on a quick thread here because it's been playing on my mind since seeing Steve Carlson do his concept albums, 5 concept albums, and suggested that we all give it a go. So my initial reaction was, I must have loads, but I can't think of any. And then, well, there's Yoshimi Battles of Pink Robot, but I've talked about that endlessly, so I can't do that. And then I kept thinking of them, and of course I've got absolutely loads. So what I've decided to do is choose a single concept album from each decade from the 60s through. So one to represent each decade. And all of them have some sort of, a theme which gels with me in one way or the other. So here we go. I'm going to start whiz through, keep it short, and I'm starting in 1969 with the Moody Blues and To Our Children's Children's Children. So this album was. It's their 5th studio album, and I love a spoonerism, and in our household they have forever been called the Bloody Moos, but there you go, the Moody Blues, 5th studio album, as I say, and this was inspired by the space race in the 60s, and in particular the Apollo moon landings, and the whole theme is about the sort of going out into space and maybe not returning for hundreds of years. And there's also an imagining that the album was sort of put into a time capsule and wouldn't be opened until 200 years later. So hence the title there, To Our Children's Children's Children. This is actually, I checked on Discogs on this actually is a first release, but it's got a £5 sticker on there. So whether that was a subsequent one, I checked, the Bank of England do an inflation counter, and if this was £5 in 1969, it would be equivalent to £73 now. So albums haven't gone up that much, even though they're bloody expensive. It's only a single LP, and it's the Moody Blues. So there you go. Now, so we move into the 70s, and I could have picked about 30 from the 70s. Obviously, there's a lot of prog stuff, but not just prog. And I've decided to choose a bit of irony, and that is Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. Also their 5th studio album, so a bit of a theme there. And this is completely ironic because this album was intended as a parody or a spoof on the whole idea of the concept album. It's ended up being one of the greatest concept albums ever. So, it was after Ian Anderson was irritated that the previous album, Aqualung, was by some critics referred to as a concept album, which he never considered it to be. So he made this one up as a joke. It was slightly inspired by Monty Python, and that's sort of like the whole idea of spoofing things. It's supposedly based on an epic poem by obviously fictional, but pretending to be real in here, of an 8-year-old genius called Gerald Bostock. And it was, an epic poem written by him, and that's what it's all based on. It's even a single track across both sides, so there's no breakdown there. Now, this particular version of it is a much more recent one. It's the Stephen Wilson remix. I've got a very old copy of it originally, and it still does a whole newspaper of the whole story written down, and this one's got also add-ons for the whole background of it, so there you go, that's that. And we move into the 80s. Now, I had a choice of one, and I think that's partly because the 80s wasn't a decade which was had a lot of concept albums. I think the whole thing had sort of drifted out by then. But it's also because I have very few albums from the 80s. I wasn't collecting them. But one which is, or at least partially is Kate Bush and the Hounds of Love from 1985. And this has two, each side is a particular suite. So the first side is Hounds of Love. And that's less of a concept. It's got all the great all the great hits on there. Running Up That Hill, Hands of Love, the big sky. Mother stands for comfort, cloud busting. But it's really the second side, which is called the Ninth Wave, and that is based on it's about a woman drifting in the sea at night, and it's based on a Tennyson poem called "The Coming of Arthur," which is about Arthurian King Arthur basically, and there's a bit of the poem there which says, "Wave after wave, each mightier than the last, till last a ninth one, gathering half the deep and full of voices, slowly rose and plunged roaring, and all the wave was in a flame." Now, everyone knows this. It is quite proggy. I mean, the previous ones have been quite proggy. The Moody Blues are sort of proto-prog, not really prog. Thick as a Brick, that's prog. Kate Bush is quite proggy on here. This was described as post-prog at one point, I think. Great album. It's considered her best. And so we move into the 90s, and I was surprised with this. The 90s, I could, even though I've got a lot of albums, I started collecting again then. There aren't that many which you might consider to be truly concept albums. It wasn't a decade full of them. Unlike the 70s was loads and loads, and the 60s was loads and loads as well, to be honest. You think of the Beatles and, Sergeant Pepper's, even the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds was considered to be a concept album. But one which I think is, even though the band might not consider it, is OK Computer and Radiohead from 1997. So now the first of the album, which isn't a fifth, this was their third, of course. I had it on CD at the time. This is the 20th anniversary reissue. It's a this one's a triple with lots of added tracks on there. But it's essentially a theme, because it's all about the underlying theme is about the dangers of over-reliance on technology, and also the potential for its use for sinister and nefarious ends. Think of Karma Police and Paranoid Android and so on, and the dangers of all that. A theme very, very relevant today with worries over AI and hacking, for political purposes and so on. So it really is a concept album, even if Radiohead wouldn't consider it. And of course, it's they're prog. Don't shout about it, but they are. And now we come to one which isn't prog, but it's got its slight leanings, and we cross the pond for this one into the 2000s, and this is a decade like the 70s, where there are loads and loads and loads of that. I could probably have chosen from 20 concept, themed based albums from the 00s, the noughties, but I'm choosing one which is an out and out one. It's Green Day, An American Idiot from 2004. This is actually a surprise, their seventh studio. I think it's their famous. I know Dookie from 10 years earlier is considered by many, but I like this one. Now they apparently have called it, a play on a rock opera. They've called it a punk rock opera, and it is based on a fictional character called the Jesus of Suburbia, which obviously is one of the names of the tracks, and is broken down into lots of sub-tracks. A very proggy thing to do, and a very concept album thing to do. And who apparently is the fictional character is a lower middle class American anti-hero, and the album really sort of expresses the delusionment and descent of the generation which came of age, with the events of things like 9/11 and the Iraq War and the way that was being pursued. So it's very, very well known. Doesn't require me to talk about it. Now we come to the tens, and I'm going with public service broadcasting. We don't want too many space stuff, so I'm not not going for the Race for Space, because that's obviously pretty much the same theme as the Moody Blues album I started with. This is Every Valley. This is sort of almost equal my favourite of their albums, their third, and it's all about, let me just pull my notes up, it's all about the growth and the ultimate decline and death of the South Wales coal mining industry, and the impact of the people in the valleys where all that took place, the valleys of South Wales, which all run down north south towards the coast and the big cities on the coast like Swansea, Cardiff, and Newport. It's quite telling for me. My dad and my paternal family, side of the family, come from South Wales, from Newport and Monmouthshire, and the sort of the eastern end of the valleys. This is a beautiful album. It's very touching in places as well. It does feature the usual, probably the last to be very heavily reliant on actual samples of public service broadcasts on the radio. But it also features a male voice choir, and there's a picture in the middle of there, and the valleys were really famous for this, sort of having every village in the valleys had its male voice choirs. So the miners used to do that this way of trying to get the dust out of their lungs, I imagine. This one also features guest vocalists from some Welsh musicians, and like for example James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers appears on it. So we come to the last one, and the current decade, and in fact I'm going for the current year, and having started with a space themed album, I'm going to finish with one it's sort of relevant today, and this is and for my t-shirt, and this is Steven Wilson and the Overview, which was released in March 2025. I have talked. Obviously, I've talked about this a bit this year, but I think it's a perfect example of a concept album, and it is brilliant. And it's basically, the Overview is all about the feelings that astronauts get in space when they're in orbit of the Earth, and it sort of comes in two ways apparently. One is just the sheer beauty and majesty of the Earth, looking at it from space, and then the second is really the feeling of, just seeing the what's out there, and how tiny Earth and its people and individuals actually are in the just vastness of the universe. There are two sort of themes on here, but both from the same point of view. One, looking at the minutiae of what's going on in Earth, and the other just looking out to the vastness of space. So the first side is called Objects Outlive Us, which is quite long. That's a 23-minute side. And the B side is The Overview, which is a bit shorter at sort of 18 minutes, which is really looking out at the at space. I mean, even though people have said there's just two tracks on here, they are broken down, so and they are quite different, so it's not, I don't think it's really two tracks, it's two themes, two suites, shall we say. And this has been and remains at the moment my album of the year this year. It is brilliant, and of course it's quite proggy. So all of these have a nod to prog. That's probably the concept element of them, even though at least most would not consider themselves to be prog. But there you go. So I really enjoyed doing that. So Steve, thanks for thanks for the suggestion of this. It got me thinking, and then realising just how many concept albums I actually really do have. So I am slightly delayed in doing the second part of my July new releases, so I'll get to that in the next week. I've just been sidetracked with other stuff over the last week. So thanks for watching. Cheers.